have been reporting from Yakini, which is less than 500 meters towards the Gaza city. The forces who are very much confident and ready to fight against Hamas terrorists. This time they want to finish the war. They are going to finish the Hamas terrorists, is what the Israel has been speaking from the first day.
See, right now we are showing the visuals from the ground zero, where now artillery tanks that are now entering to the forward areas. On the ground zero, this shows the Israel is all prepared for the big war that they are going to declare soon. Warning that they have given to the cadres and also the locals of the Gaza city to vacate the area within 24 hours. These are the never seen visuals on the roads of Israel ever before, because there has not been this massive deployment on the ground zero by the Israel forces.
Hello and welcome, you watching the Weekend Debate with me, Shavinson. Ladies and gentlemen, exactly on this day, just about a week ago, Israel witnessed one of the worst attacks in their history. In fact, this ongoing war with the Hamas has led to a situation where many within Israel are now demanding that there should be no compromise when it comes to dealing with a terrorist group called the Hamas. On the other hand, the Hezbollah has also now joined hands. While some essentially argue that there should be a differentiation between the Hamas and the Palestinians, Israel says that there is a rule of law that they are following. That is exactly why there is an ultimatum that has now been given to Gazans to leave the city so that they can carry on with their operation. Question here is, how exactly should Israel be dealing with a terrorist group like Hamas? Some say that perhaps it should not be a revenge. But can that argument really hold when a country has faced a dastardly attack of this nature? Tonight, that's our weekend debate. How exactly should terrorists be dealt with? The way Israel is talking about, or how some of the Islamic nations are suggesting. The headlines we're tracking this weekend debate: Israel goes all out to destroy Hamas posts, ground offensive next. Hamas's aerial commander Mirad Abu Mirad killed in Israel strikes. Over 1 million people head south in Gaza after Israel's warning. Israel takes Hezbollah terrorists head on at the northern border. Humanitarian lobby seeks for pause in fight against terror. Can there be compromise in the battle? India delivers a crushing 7-wicket defeat to Pakistan at Modi Stadium in Ahmedabad. Eight days after Hamas launched an unprecedented attack on Israel, Israel is now hitting back, and it is hitting back hard. From striking Hamas's bases to the elimination of its top commander, Abu Mirad, Israel is going all out in its fight against terror. Here's a report on all that has transpired through the day, and then we begin the weekend debate.
There is no let-up in fight against terror. Israel continues to pound Hamas infrastructure.
This is the fire where the Hamas is firing multiple rockets at this point of time, but it has been intercepted by Israel, is what we know. So yes, it's a fresh attack, a fresh rocket that has been fired from the Hamas side. As far as the information of the IDF is concerned, well, we have been reporting from the operational base of IDF, where we can see there are artilleries, there are tanks, small tanks, which has been present here. But yes, it's an IDF forces which has also eliminated a terrorist squad that tried to infiltrate into Israeli territory from Lebanon.
The war against terror is on two fronts now, with Israel striking Hezbollah terrorists trying to enter from Lebanon border.
हवा से जो है हमास के आतंकी ठिकानों को निशाना बनाया जा रहा है। कोशिश लगातार हिजबुल्लाह की तरफ से भी की जा रही है कि दक्षिण जो उत्तर का इलाका है वहां से बड़े आतंकियों को घुसपैठ करवाई जाए। एक ऐसा सेल जो कि फिलिस्तीन के आतंकियों को घुसपैठ करवाने की कोशिश कर रहा था उत्तर से, यानी कि लेबनान की साइड से, उसे जो है ध्वस्त किया गया है, उन आतंकियों को मार गिराया गया है आईडीएफ की तरफ से। लेकिन लगातार कोशिश अब हिजबुल्लाह की तरफ से की जा रही है कि टू फ्रंट वॉर में धकेला जाए इजराइल को। इजराइल का कहना है कि वो पूरी तरह से तैयार है, अगर हिजबुल्लाह की तरफ से भी कोई कोशिश की जाती है, किसी तरह की ऐसी हरकत की जाती है जो इजराइल के लोगों के लिए खतरनाक है, इजराइल की एकता और अखंडता के लिए खतरनाक है।
Israel military dropped pamphlets and asked civilians in Gaza to evacuate in order to avoid collateral damage. With massive destruction in Gaza, at least 1 million civilians are heading towards the south.
We do this, we advertised our intentions in advance, not because it has any military logic, it doesn't, because we want civilians not to be affected by the war. We didn't put those civilians there. They are not our enemy. We are not trying to kill or injure any civilians. We are fighting against Hamas. That needs to be abundantly clear.
But the international humanitarian lobby wants a pause in operations.
You know, we can't lose sight of the fact that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians had nothing to do with Hamas and Hamas's appalling attacks, and they're suffering as a result as well.
That asking 1 million people moving to the south in 24 hours is just impossible. You cannot move such a volume of people in a short period of time, especially if there is no shelters, neither transportation means. And from this point of view, we consider that this warning is good to know, but they have to give more time in order to make it possible and not to create a dire humanitarian situation.
Why should fight against terrorism be viewed with humanitarian lens? Bureau Report, Republic TV.
Well, the question here is how exactly should Israel be responding at this point in time? As some say that is it simply out of anger? Would Israel make the same blunder that the United States of America made a decade ago when it came to post 9/11? That's the larger debate that's essentially emerging. But a stronger word emerging here in India, that there is no nudge, there is no wink approach when it comes to dealing with terrorism. Joining us from the national capital is Ambassador Deepak Vora. Terry Newman is joining us from Tel Aviv. Burzine Wagmar is joining us from London. Stephen Golub is joining us from California. Myra Demeter is joining us from California. And from Hong Kong, we have Andrew Leung and from Islamabad, Raja Faisal. Terry Newman, I want to begin by asking you this question. Many who are arguing at this point in time that Israel should not really respond in anger. Perhaps, revenge is served best when it is cold. What would you tell them when they essentially argue, saying that, look here, this shouldn't be the response?
And thank you for having us on. Israel is not responding in anger, and Israel is not responding in revenge. Israel is holding back its response, enabling the entire northern part of Gaza to move to the southern part of Gaza in order to save human lives. We are actually risking Israeli soldiers' lives in order to reduce the number of civilian lives. Now, I heard you mentioning the US response to 9/11 and the sense of revenge and what they did in Afghanistan and what they did in Iraq. But let us remember, Afghanistan and Iraq were on the other sides of the world. We're talking here about, in effect, a nest of 50 to 100,000 terrorists that are within a 5 to 10 kilometer distance of your house. I mean, I don't think abroad people understand how close and compact this all is. So Israel is definitely not acting out of revenge. It's acting out of its responsibility as a sovereign state to protect the citizens within its state. And it's acting as a responsible member of the rule-abiding international community in minimizing civilian casualties while still going after these evil, depraved terrorists who carried out a massacre less than a week ago.
Right. Well, that's exactly why I've been saying that can there be this middle path argument that has been put forth by many. Stephen, let me ask you this question, because when it comes to the United States of America, the responses that have come in the past, in fact, some Western media columnists who have been arguing in some of your leading newspapers today, is the fact that the blunder that was made by the United States of America should not be repeated by Israel. But the fact of the matter is this: can we really deal with a terrorist group like the Hamas in the manner that some are essentially arguing at this point in time? And what sort of a message would we then be sending? Because if you hear from our friend who's joining us from Islamabad, they will essentially tell you a different story altogether. But the fact of the matter is that Hamas is nothing but a terrorist organization.
Well, I guess I'll start by violating the first rule of being a TV commentator by saying, I don't know exactly what Israel should do. I agree with the analysis that your Tel Aviv guest just presented. I don't have any difference with that. But on the one hand, Israel is responding to an unprecedented attack on civilians, butchery. It hasn't done a great job of actually, in the propaganda war, of informing the world opinion of how Hamas bases its soldiers, its equipment, its weaponry in or near the hospitals or schools or other facilities that Israel is bombing and attacking. So I could see the logic and justification for it. On the other hand, going into Gaza now is what Hamas wants, because Hamas is indifferent to the civilian casualties the massive civilian casualties that will result. But by drawing Israel in, it will generate a lot of world opinion, a lot of opinion in the Arab world that will be very hostile to Israel because of the fighting and damage that will ensue. And it will increase the chances of Israel and Saudi Arabia not normalizing relations in the foreseeable future, if ever, which is a big reason, one of the big reasons for this butchery, for the attack that took place on October 7th. Plus, of course, there is the underlying humanitarian issue here of all the damage that will be done, all the civilian lives that will be lost, even if ultimately Hamas could prevent all this by coming out in the open, by releasing hostages, but those are things it's not going to do. So I see the logic of this, but both as a strategic and a humanitarian matter, there are questions to be raised, to at least be considered about what seems to be this inevitable invasion.
Well, it may be inevitable, but Myra, look at the current situation that Israel essentially faces. Reports now coming in that with regards to normalization of ties with Israel, Saudi Arabia has put it on the ice. And that could be really worrisome. And what kind of a message are we really sending out at a time when Israel has seen one of the worst attacks since its independence? Shouldn't the world really come together and a message should be sent out even for countries like Saudi Arabia that what are you essentially trying to pander with? Hamas, a terrorist organization which is nothing less than the ISIS, are we really going to say that yes, we can handle them with a kid in the glove kind of a situation? Mara, that question was for you.
Sorry, is it a question for me? Is it a question for me?
Myra, I believe Myra, there is some problem with her line. We'll try and connect with her. Burzin, why don't you take that? Myra, can you hear me? We'll try and connect with her in a short while. Now, Burzin, why don't you take that question? Can we really take this approach? And more importantly, do you think Israel finds itself in a tough spot if countries like this, Saudi Arabia, essentially are indicating that, look, if this goes on, then our normalization ties will be put on the ice pack?
Israel will have to ride it out. This is its worst existential crisis since 1948. Hamas is a death cult. It's a misogynistic, racist death cult. And Israel's response, insofar as I'm concerned as a historian, is proportionate. But what I want to tell Terry in Tel Aviv is this as a historian, that I have a horrible sense of deja vu of June 82 Beirut, Terry, in that diplomatic skullduggery will set in and Arafat was allowed to exit from Beirut for Tunis. And he got away with it back then. True, Khalid Mishal is sitting in Doha, which is the Club Med of terrorism, insofar as I'm concerned. But there are other Hamas operatives in Gaza who need to be taken out. And if that involves for the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, going into a ground battle, so be it. It has to be done. Because this time Hamas needs to be decimated. And this time we cannot have any diplomatic skullduggery or backroom dealings with, say, Ankara or Doha, who are dishonorable partners to say the least, who will want to see some Hamas operatives being allowed a safe passage out of the Gaza Strip. That was done in 82 in June, and that time too, Israel came under plenty of flack with Defense Minister Sharon and what happened in Beirut. But Israel wrote that out, and this time too, it needs to ride it out, despite what progressive leftist opinion in London and elsewhere is. 3 Jewish schools in North London are closed indefinitely as I go on air. Nothing of the sort is simply incomparable to what is happening to Jews, can be compared to what is happening in the Muslim world. The so-called suffering, if Muslims cannot take a position and are so morally cockeyed not to distinguish between secular Palestinians and Hamas, then there is not much to be said insofar as I'm concerned. And let me wind up, Shravan, by pointing out this too, that Moscow and Tehran are trying to take a stance and just capitalize on a situation by playing to the Muslim world gallery with their anti-Western attitude. Again, they too are dishonorable arbiters. Iran has stoked this in more ways than one. Hamas's weapons come from Iran, militarily speaking. Finance comes from Doha and elsewhere. But all weapons come smuggled through the Sinai Peninsula to Hamas from Iran. There is, and the IRGC brigades as such, who in turn supply the Al-Qasim brigades.
Burzin, since you make a mention of Tehran, I was planning to take this up in a short while from now, because just wiping off Hamas from the face of earth is not enough, I would say. And that is an aspect that perhaps, Terry, you will have to think about it, that when you have Iran, which has been supporting Hamas all this while, because let's not forget the stockpile of ammunition that we are looking at could not have been possible had it not been for nations like Iran really going ahead with that kind of support. But before I allow you to respond, Terry, I want you to hear what our friend from Islamabad, Raja Faisal, has to say, and because that will give you a sense of what the Islamic nations are essentially looking at this point in time. Saudi Arabia has already, given that kind of indication of how they expect things to really develop in the days to come. But Raja Faisal, just think about this. How long will you be supporting terrorist organizations? You do have, you largely have this great distinction. Your country has this great distinction of being able to only manufacture one thing. And for all our guests joining us from all the other different countries, Pakistan has this dubious distinction of being the leading manufacturer when it comes to terrorists. So it's not surprising, Raja Faisal, when today you would not condemn what is really happening in Israel, what the Hamas has essentially done. But think about this. What happened as far as Pakistan's Tehreek-e-Taliban?
My friend Shavan.
Let's not forget what you have been going through.
Yeah, Shavan, my friend Shavan, please do allow me to respond to all of the points you have made about Pakistan. I think in this context, Pakistan had nothing to do, but still you had to bring in some kind of masala in it related to Pakistan, that Pakistan somehow is a terrorist country or financing terror or something like that. Now you are playing to the gallery, you having all of these guests, you're just telling them, oh, maybe behind Hamas, it would be Pakistan too. Let me give you some details about people of Palestine. 2 million people, they are living in Gaza. I just want to tell all of the participants here, let's talk about humanity. Let's not talk about Judaism. Let's not talk about Islam. Let's not talk about Christianity.
Raja, let's not make a mistake
about.
Okay, Raja, I know you will hate me.
Abrahamic religions. All three of
Raja,
them,
I think so. All of us are intelligent
religions.
enough to make this distinction.
And let me enlighten you. Earlier, the guest was talking about, we would not be going towards Ankara for talks. We would not be going towards Doha for talks. Well, we already know that you won't go anywhere else. Reason being, Oslo Accord was there, you did not respect it. There were resolutions from UN, you did not respect it. You did not respect all of the accords which took place in between Palestine and Israel. That is why we are standing here now. That is why peace is yet to be restored in the region.
Raja, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Raja, I won't undermine the intelligence. Raja, unfortunately, unlike you right now, I would not like to undermine the intelligence of my guests who are there on this broadcast. Raja, allow me to speak also. You've spoken, allow me to speak here. Now, let's be very clear. No one is equating here the Palestinians to the Hamas. You want to do it, you are free to do whatever you feel like. Let's be very clear. No one is saying that there shouldn't be a rule of war. But Terry will answer that question. But Ambassador Vora, Raja Faisal says that, look here, I was looking for some sort of a masala, that's why I brought in the Pakistan aspect here. No, that's not the case. I'm largely talking about, and it is disappointing to see some of the responses that have come in from the Islamic nations. They need to understand. that there is no good terrorism and bad terrorism. And it is high time that they speak in unison when it comes to terrorism. And perhaps the United States of America is also to be blamed, for pandering to the needs of countries like Pakistan, and that's the reason why what they call this Islamic Jihad still exists. Ambassador Vora, I want you to respond to it. Okay, Ambassador Vora, you've heard what Raja Faisal has to say. Why don't you take that?
Yes. Can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir. Go ahead. Ambassador Vora, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. Always, yes, sir, always a pleasure and an honor to be on the world's favorite channel, Republic TV, and you are one of our best anchors. Sir, let me put it to you like this, and particularly to our friend in Tel Aviv and to the others. Today, 1.4 billion Indians are Israelis. I'm born a Sanatan Dharmi, a Hindu, but today I'm Jewish, sir. Because we know what you're going through. We face this in our own country. And today, my heart says, Pizzakon le Israel. I've served in that area. Victory to Israel. You are fighting for your survival. Sir, as I mentioned, I've served in that area, and to my friend from Pakistan. Israel has a constitution. Please read it, sir. 20% of the population of Israel is either Palestinian Arabs or non-Palestinian Arabs. That means Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Indonesians, people from West Africa, and so 1/5 of the population. And the Supreme Court has often ruled that they have the right to practice their religion. That is Israel, a civilized, democratic nation. On the other hand, the constitution of Hamas says every Jew should be pushed into the sea. They have no right to exist. We don't accept that at all. As far as my neighboring country is concerned, sir, you might think that India drags you into everything. Take a look at the Global Terrorism Index done by a university in the United States. 8 out of every 10 incidents of terror are either linked to a person who adheres to the Islamic faith or to an Islamic nation. I'm not making this up. You may disagree with this. You may scream till you're blue in the face about Islamophobia. Let me complete it, sir. I didn't interrupt you, sir. We have a certain protocol in the Foreign Service. We
Raja,
listen to what the other person is saying.
Yeah.
So,
Ambassador Vora,
may I complete it, sir? I haven't finished, sir. We listen to...
That is being fed by your country. Your country is investing
Raja,
in
come on,
terrorism
there is a decorum.
in Pakistan. We have given 80
Raja, with
Sir, this is
honest
not...
request, Raja, honest request, please don't disrupt, please don't disrupt. Raja, this is an earnest request, please don't disrupt, allow him to make his point.
Sir, this is not an India-Pakistan debate. We're talking about what is happening in Israel.
Ambassador,
Is
please
he
go
through,
ahead,
sir?
make your point.
Is he through, sir?
Yep,
All
please
right.
go ahead, don't
Sir,
worry,
I
don't worry.
just
Raja
wanted to say
Faisal
that
has
what
the
we are
habit,
seeing
has the
today-
habit of getting agitated.
All right. We are taught in the Indian Foreign Service, lose your temper and lose the argument. Israel's priority today, sir, is to demolish Hamas. I believe that the security of the 125, 130 hostages is number 2 on the list. And by demolishing Hamas, you are doing the world a favor. It's no longer Israel versus Hamas. It is the world versus the worst kind of terrorism that we have seen. And now let me tell you, sir, from an international perspective, the United States, which had pivoted away from the Middle East to Asia, is back in the Middle East. Russia is happy and sad at the same time. China is totally confused. It doesn't know what is going on. The Arabs, as usual, are divided. Israel is determined, and my grand old auntie, my grandmother in New York, also known as the United Nations, is totally irrelevant. Sir, I'm glad you got me on this debate. I have a personal interest. My wife's late father was in the first Indian contingent that went on a peacekeeping mission, United Nations Emergency Force in Gaza, at a time when Shri Abdul Jamal Nasser was provoking these guys in Gaza, was encouraging to come and attack Israel. And then the Suez Canal was nationalized and all kinds of funny things happened, etc. So this goes back a long time to the very creation of the State of Israel. Israel has a right to exist. Everybody in his right mind said. And finally, sir, let me conclude. I have here my mobile phone, and I have 2 messages. I shall read them out because we are all adults. Here is one from a Saudi friend somewhere in the United States. He says he was accosted he met an American friend who then asked him, I'm saying this, and please, my friend from Pakistan, don't get agitated. This is a message. It says, I was asked, does your religion encourage necrophilia, sex with corpses? This is because of the video that Hamas had released. And second, sir, I studied in France. I'd asked one of my friends, Who are these people who are protesting against what Israel is doing? The answer is, Mr. Ambassador, you know who they are. They are the same people who beheaded one of our teachers. They are the same people who did the Charlie Hebdo thing. They are the same people who attacked that concert. What more can I say, sir? Islam has been damaged by what Hamas has done. And if Israel is doing anything, sir, I look at it in a positive light, giving back to Islam the dignity and purity that it deserves by eliminating a terrorist organization like Hamas, sir.
Right. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Let me also quickly go across to Myra. Myra, I spoke to the former Israel Prime Minister a short while back. He largely spoke about the complication that has come up right now in terms of the operation that's going to take place in the days to come. Many say that this time, if you really want to wipe out Hamas from the face of earth, you will have to do things differently. And when they argue that things have to be done in a different manner, that it essentially means that there's a possibility that in the days to come, there could be a ground offensive, a ground invasion could take place. That may not really sit well with the Islamic nation. And that's where perhaps even the United States of America might find themselves in an uncomfortable situation. If that really happens, Myra, what is it that you believe that most of the developed nations, the G7 nations in particular, should essentially do in order to back Israel at this crisis moment?
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I live in a community. It is a very special community. It's an international destination, but it's also a small town. I live in Beverly Hills. We are a community that is multicultural, but we are majority Jewish. We have 5 members of our city council who are Jewish, but we accept all nationalities, and we work together in a very cohesive way to not only fulfill our job as an international destination to welcome tourists, but also to make our residents feel comfortable, give them the amenities they deserve, and represent them with voices. I just want to put in that I myself was a volunteer in Israel over 50 years ago on a kibbutz. I've maintained over a 50-year relationship with the kibbutzniks. I speak from experience when I say it is a very idyllic place. It is rural. Many people in Israel who don't want to live in the big cities want to live in these communities. They started out as communities put on different places in order to secure the borders of Israel. And they developed a system of working together. It was a socialistic system whereby the children lived together and moved up by classes. It freed the people to work in the fields, to work for defense, and they all shared things. When I went in 1970, there was one television for 1,000 people, one telephone. Everybody voted on the movies that they would see. They voted who would go to university. And the system has slowly evolved. It is moving more now towards a capitalistic system, but the transition from a socialistic to capitalistic system among many, many kibbutzim is different in each case. But I'd like to just bring it down to the human level. The people in the kibbutz with whom I still have a relationship and who have relationships along Israel, everyone knows everybody else. It's a small town, like Beverly Hills is a small town. We all know one another and we all support one another. A story that I heard from one of the kibbutzim, kibbutz Be'ira, which was one of the ones that was decimated, was that one of the women who's now a hostage would drive to the border and pick up the children from Gaza to bring them to the hospital for treatment on a weekly basis. It is a people-to-people relationship. Hamas is not a people-to-people relationship. Hamas is a terrorist organization, and what Israel is doing right now is fighting for its survival and fighting for the survival of Jews around the world. I believe that they will do what's necessary.
Right.
I believe that they will persevere. They've had a rough beginning, but I think that our job in terms of the diaspora and in terms of all the people who are around the world is to listen and to help inform people as to what Hamas is, what their goal is, and what the Israeli goal is. I think that as long as we keep doing that, we will be able to keep public opinion on the side of the Israelis. They don't want to kill anybody. They send leaflets. They have cell phone numbers asking people to leave. That's not what happened when the Hamas came into the kibbutzim and indiscriminately just killed, raped, butchered people. It's a totally different sense of people. So I hope what I can relay to you in this short dialogue between all of us around the world is the fact that my community supports Israel, and as long as they get good information, I believe that they will continue. They are organizing, they are sending supplies.
Right.
There are even people who want to volunteer and go over. They're disseminating information, good information. These are not false facts. These are true things that come to us directly from people, from my friends who live in kibbutzim, whose fathers, sons, brothers have been called up, sometimes daughters, that both men and women serve in both the army as well as the reserves. My husband, a former IDF officer, is too old to be called up right now. But in 1973, when he first arrived in the United States, we were part of the callback, although his specialty was not something that they wanted. They wanted the pilots and the fighters. So my then boyfriend did not return for the 1973 fight. But right now, there are people from our community from all over the world on flights going back to defend the existence of Israel.
Absolutely, and that's exactly, Myra, that's exactly why I was saying that there cannot be any compromise when it comes to fighting terror. I want to get a quick word from Andrew Leung to understand the Chinese perspective on this entire matter, because it seems, as Ambassador Vohra was pointing out, it is quite confusing. Is China really playing with fire? Andrew Leung, I know I'm coming to you at the end of the debate, but I'm sorry, I was planning to give everyone equal amount of time. So Andrew Leung, I just want to understand, is China really playing with fire by not really coming out in the open and talking clearly as far as where they really stand with regards to Israel?
Well, of course, from China's perspective, all forms of terrorism have to be condemned. And there's no way for terrorism to prevail. And China, of course, respects each country to defend their own security and integrity. However, I think that all this conversation seems to have missed the big elephant in the room. And look at the plight of the Palestinian people and their aspirations for nationhood. I mean, look at the land occupied by Palestinians over the past 40 years. They've been squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, and their access to water and then the decent way of life has been tremendously compromised. And that has led to this kind of unfortunate explosion of anger. Don't forget, I think let's not kid ourselves that this is only an anger of a small group of terrorists. It reflects the deep plight of the Palestinian people who are squeezed into Gaza before this happened, into a ghetto of poverty, of abject poverty, and people not living in dignity because they've got enough access to enough water and medical supplies and all that. So the solution must be a response to their aspirations for nationhood. As the world responded to Israel's aspirations nationhood about 75 years ago. And then I think the aspirations of the Palestinian people for independent and dignified nationhood must be responded to. And I think that requires an international community, that requires the community, the intelligent community of the Israel to respond to this situation. But otherwise, even if you eliminate Hamas, that this cancer, this anger will still remain, and that could another terrorist group could happen, and also depends on what Israel is doing in Gaza, because the Gaza is a highly inhabited small strip of land. Forcing one half of the people to move to the south could compound this situation. And then if Israel is not careful, it could inflame the anger of the entire Arab community. As pointed out earlier, Saudi Arabia already was in conversation with Iran and with the Palestinian Authority. And there seems to be a consensus that they support the aspirations of the Palestinian people. So I think that this big elephant in the room must be addressed. Otherwise, this sad saga will never end.
Terry, you've heard almost all the guests from across the world, their entire opinion on this matter. One thing becomes very clear. There's a common thread that, of course, there is no doubt about taking a step back right now. And as Burzine very rightly pointed out, the worry right now, Terry, is this. And I want you to answer what Burzine pointed out, that will there be a step back once again to look at, pacifying, say, for example, Turkey at this point in time, or to pacify Qatar, because as Burzine has coined a new term for them altogether, the gang is very different altogether. Terry, do you believe that this time, if this happens, then perhaps we are not really doing justice?
An excellent issue, and I think the focus actually needs not to be on Israel, but needs to be on the Arab world, because there is actually something new that's happening here, and I think it hasn't been raised in this conversation so far, so I will raise it. Hamas is a Sunni organization, okay, but it has aligned itself very strongly with the Shiite arc from Hezbollah in Lebanon to Iran. Now, traditionally there has been a huge rift between the Sunni world, which is led by Saudi Arabia, and the Shiite world, which is led by Iran. And this is a rift that goes back 1,400 years and is far deeper, stronger, and bloodier than the feud between Israel and the Palestinians. So we are now waiting to see how the Arab world, the Arab Sunni world, responds to this. Is it going to go on the side of progress, or is it going to go on the side of Shiite-inspired terror? I can tell you that Hamas officially left. It's the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, which was a Egyptian Sunni organization. It actually officially left that in 2017. So there really is a new opportunity. And with the Abrahamic Accords, where we've seen large chunks of the younger generation of the Arab world saying, we do not want ISIS to be defining how the world sees us. We do not want Al-Qaeda to be defining how the world sees us. We are people who believe in education. We believe in science. We've just put a spaceship on the moon. We don't want to be people that are dealing with things like this. We have moved on. So I think the first issue is the Arab world and the Muslim world, even wider, has to decide which side of this debate does it want to be on. That's number one. Number two, the Western world and the global world, I should actually say, needs to decide, is Hamas the equivalent of the IRA or the PLO, which was in effect a terror organization that then turned into a political organization? Or is Hamas like ISIS? It's something that can never be reformed. I can tell you our answer to that is Hamas is ISIS. So that's our answer. But many countries around the world will have to make their decision on that question. The third issue is the humanitarian issue. And what's been left out of all of this discussion is actually, Israel left Gaza in 2005, but the only country that actually allows Gazan workers in and out and food in and out is Israel. People are forgetting that Gaza has a border with Egypt as well. And in fact, its border with Egypt is to Sinai. Sinai is completely empty. It's unbelievable. You have here a densely populated area with a huge country, which is empty. I'm sure you're aware that in Egypt, 98% of the population lives on 2% of the land, right? The country has just gone to the IMF again, saying it has run out of foreign reserves. If I was sitting at the moment in Washington, I would be saying, hang on a second. I've got here a humanitarian crisis. Israel can no longer provide food, water, electricity as long as there are 150 hostages in there. It's just unreasonable to ask it. We've got here a huge area of empty land in Egypt, and we have a country with 120 million people that is going bankrupt. Why don't we put all those pieces together and try and find a sensible solution for the humanitarian crisis with international funding in the Sinai? And that just seems to make sense for everyone. It shows also Muslim and Arab solidarity, and that seems to be the way forward.
First, you kick them out of their country, then you occupy their land, and then you're pushing them away. There is a blockade from all sides, from sea, from land, from everywhere. All of the borders are locked, and now you're telling them, oh, they should be going somewhere else. It's like, my grandfather, he served British Army when he was a 20-year-old. He served British Army. He fought for you people. He fought for you people, and he served in Iraq. And I very well know at that time, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, they coexisted absolutely fine. Problem raised when Zionism came to Palestine. That's what the problem is. Zionism is the problem. Judaism is not the problem at all.
Stephen, this is a microcosm. No, Stephen, okay, got your point, Raja. You made your point, Stephen. Okay, Terry, I'll give you the opportunity to respond, but I want to give a quick word. I want to give a quick word to Stephen as well as Burzine, and finally you can end it, Terry. Stephen, you've heard what our friend from Islamabad has to say. And that's largely the sentiment that you would actually see from most of the Islamic nations at this point in time, and Israel essentially would find themselves in a spot. And that's exactly where Terry is saying that Washington perhaps also needs to play a very decisive, pivotal role, and really expecting way too much from Israel when they're going through this crisis moment.
Whole world is speaking for the justice. It's only India and Israel, they don't want justice.
Stephen first. Stephen. Okay. You call it justice, but what about the justice of those who've been massacred by a terrorist group? You don't speak about them, Raja. That's the unfortunate part, but that's okay. I was not expecting you to really talk about justice when it comes to
1947. Shaban, you're not talking about those who's been killed since 1947 onwards.
Now you say that Oslo Accord. You say that the Oslo Accord was not Oslo Accord. One second. You know what happened? What happened when you really trusted the Hamas back in 2017? I don't want to do this fighting match with you, Raja. Fighting match with you does not really work out. Now the fact of the matter is that in fact, I would rather say this, Stephen, and perhaps Terry, you can come into this. One big mistake that one mistake that the Israelis actually made was for the longest time they thought that Hamas was busy governing Gaza, but that wasn't the case from 2017.
All of them, they are racist.
Okay, you may say that whatever you feel like, but the fact of the matter is this. One big mistake, Stephen, I want you to come in. First, respond to what Terry has to say, that Washington does have an important pivotal role to play, especially when Israel is going through this crisis moment.
Well, I agree with that. I also think Terry made an excellent point about the split within the Islamic community between Shia and Sunnis, at least in this instance, being temporarily healed. We'll see what comes from that, the ramifications down the line. In terms of Washington, I think President Biden may actually, in terms of moving 2 aircraft carrier groups into the Eastern Mediterranean, and statements he's made, has quite possibly discouraged Hezbollah from getting involved with this fight and greatly expanding it. So I think he's playing a constructive, strong role. I did want to comment briefly on, I think, a good point made by your Hong Kong-based guest, that sooner or later, after all this horror and destruction is over with, after we get over or get past the other horror of realizing that the number of Israelis who were killed is the equivalent of 150,000 Indians being killed in one day, given the much greater population of India. Once the war is over, at least diminished, we still have to deal with what happens with Israel and Palestine. And one of the few good things that may come out of this horrible situation, with more horror yet to come, is that the government of Benjamin Netanyahu that sought to destroy Israeli democracy has been discredited and disgraced by its incompetent way it's handled the intelligence, the strategy, the response, the preparedness. It's important to note that to move forward in any constructive way after this fighting is over or greatly diminished, Netanyahu and his right-wing religious zealot allies have to go. We talk about terrorism. Well, the Minister of National Security in Israel was convicted of 8 charges, including support for a terrorist organization and including inciting racism. Again, I'm not equating what Israel has done or that individual with the horror, the butchery of what Hamas committed. Not at all. Please don't misunderstand me. But over the years, in his dominance of Israeli politics, Benjamin Netanyahu has been a problem by building settlement after settlement after settlement in the West Bank, by discouraging or crushing any chances of a positive engagement with Palestinians, including the Palestinian Authority, which has its flaws. It's a corrupt organization, but is much more moderate and controls the West Bank. So let's keep that in mind going forward. Again, Hamas is horrible, is evil. I completely agree. It needs to be crushed to the extent we can crush an ideology, because weeds will continue to grow even after this leadership is decimated. But we need to put this in some kind of a perspective, and that perspective includes, hopefully, in the aftermath of the horrible way that Netanyahu has handled this, moving troops into the West Bank from the Gaza, from southern Israel, which also may have contributed to a lack of preparedness to suit his right-wing religious zealot allies.
Right.
Netanyahu hopefully will go, and hopefully someone who's hard-headed in terms of Israel's security, but that hard-headedness includes engaging with the more positive elements in Palestinian society, will take his place.
Well, in fact, right now, Stephen, the focus should rather be how do you really deal with a terrorist organization called the Hamas. But having said that, as we've always been advocating that there has to be a peace and dialogue when it comes to the two nations that we're talking about, Israel and Palestine, for that matter. And unlike a few of our guests who simply see the Hamas and the Palestinians in the same light, that shouldn't be the case. But let's also recognize the threat that has been posed by the Hamas. And full support is behind Israel at this point in time as they fight terrorism, not only for themselves, but for the world together. Thank you very much, Ambassador Deepak Vohra, Terry Newman, Burzine, Stephen, Myra, Andrew and Raja Faisal for joining us on the Weekend Debate. On the other side, the big exclusive coming in from Israel, where we've spoken to the deputy spokesperson of the Israel Foreign Ministry. Listen in to what Yossi Zilberman has to say.
Amity has been ranked India's #1 not-for-profit private university for 11th year, with top 10 ranked institutions in management, engineering, biotech, law, masscom, telecom, hospitality, fashion and more. Yet another top ranking for Amity University.
right now we are showing the visuals from the ground zero, where now artillery tanks that are now entering to the forward areas. On the ground zero, this shows the Israel is all prepared for the big war that they are going to declare soon. Warning that they have given to the cadres and also the locals of the Gaza city to vacate the area within 24 hours. These are the never seen visuals on the roads of Israel ever before, because there has not been this massive deployment on the ground zero by the Israel forces.
We have been reporting from Yakini, which is less than 500 meters towards the Gaza city. The forces who are very much confident and ready to fight against Hamas terrorists. This time they want to finish the war. They are going to finish the Hamas terrorists, is what the Israel has been speaking from the first day.
We are showing you from the ground zero that how these mega operations are being planned by the security forces, and we have seen how the things are moving here at the ground zero, where the big tanks here on the roads of Gaza Strip, these are moving towards the Ashkelon.
On the weekend debate tonight, we're joined by a very special guest, Deputy Spokesperson of Israel's Foreign Ministry, Yossi Zilberman. Mr. Zilberman, thank you very much for speaking to Republic TV. I know this has been a hectic few days, undoubtedly tough time for almost every Israeli. You being a part of the Israel Foreign Ministry, you've hosted several dignitaries who have come in, starting with the Secretary of State, and the kind of support that Israel has got over the last few days. Let me first begin by asking you, while on the one hand there is a clear picture that is emerging, United States of America stands steadfastly with Israel, including countries like India and several others, but do you believe that in the last few days, we've essentially seen also Islamic nations coming together and perhaps now playing that balancing card, looking at what happens to Palestine and at the same time towing the line with regards to what would be the response coming in from Israel?
I would say good evening. It's not such a good evening in the last week for Israel. And to answer your question, I don't think that we need to see it as a division between the West or specific countries against Muslim countries or countries in the Middle East. We are talking about countries who perceive life as an essence, as something to strive to and something to fight for. And when you compare that to organizations or perhaps countries that see things perhaps otherwise, Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran are countries that promote perhaps the complete opposite from what we are standing for. And this is perhaps the division that we are talking about. There is no division between Muslims and Jews. To remind you, 20% of the citizens in Israel are Muslims. There are Muslims, unfortunately, casualties in this event by Hamas. This is not a war of civilizations. This is not a war of some kind of balance. We're talking about countries who strive for life, countries who strive for prosperity, for security, for stability. And from the other hand, we are talking about organizations like Hamas that took hostage the people in Gaza, that is taking hostage also some villages and cities in the West Bank. And they are controlling and they are harming, actually. They're creating a microcosmos of hate, of terror that is inflicting pain on Israel. And we are here to finish this, and we are here to bring security to the citizens of Israel.
Mr. Zilberman, speaking about the recent developments, warning that has been given to Gazans to evacuate as soon as possible, as we understand that an impediment has been caused by the Hamas, who are preventing Gazans from leaving their city. What is the latest update? What is it that you can share with our viewers at this point in time with regards to the evacuation process? Because remember, the checkpoints also, I'm given to understand, have been shut down. So how exactly is the evacuation really taking place? And how should the world really read the warning that has been given by Israel to those living in Gaza?
I will explain it very simply. We are a country, a democratic country, and we, even at war, we have our rules, and we do not want to engage against civilians. We do not want to engage against people who have nothing to do with Hamas. And this is why we literally issued a warning telling them, listen, you have to evacuate. We don't want to hurt you. We only want to destroy the infrastructure of Hamas. This is something that is really, you're talking about a conflict, an ongoing conflict, and Israel, as a stable country, as a civilized country, is trying to, from one hand, protect its citizens, and from the other hand, not to create a total chaos, just like organizations or other countries. So this is the way you should look at it. We are aiming to destroy the infrastructure of Hamas. We are here to come against the Hamas terrorists, not against the population of Gaza. And this announcement asking people to evacuate, it is actually coming against us in a way, because we're telling Hamas, listen, we are coming against you. We are coming to get you. Get ready. But we are paying, in a way, a small price by warning Hamas in order not to hurt innocent civilians. And this is the difference between us and the terror organization Hamas.
Mr. Zilberman, can I then ask you, this war has been going on for a very long time. There is absolutely no doubt about the fact that this has been the worst that Israel has ever seen in the last 75 years. But having said that, as many that I've spoken to the last few days have been demanding that this time Hamas should be wiped out from the face of earth. Would it be correct to say that this is just the tip of the iceberg, and you are not going to rule out a possibility of a ground offensive, a ground invasion to take place after the evacuation is over?
We are not talking here about the military plans, and I'm not a military person, but I am someone who can speak in the name of the state of Israel, and I can tell you that this war against Hamas, which is absolutely ISIS, this war will not end till the infrastructure of Hamas will be dismantled. And this is what we are aiming for. I'm not going to get into details because, to be honest, I don't know all the details, whether we are going to get with tanks from the south or from the north. We are here first and foremost, sir, I will remind you in a way, I'm talking lately with many media outlets from India, and there is a lot of interest, and it warms our heart as well to see some very moving support gestures from India. And India is a remarkable country with so many people. And I want to compare, because perhaps some of the viewers are not aware of the number of citizens and civilians in Israel. Israel in total is a little bit less than 10 million people. And exactly 1 week ago on Saturday, 1,300 people were massacred, were butchered. 1,300 people, almost 4,000 people got hurt, got injured by this event. We're talking about a colossal event in a very small country. For all of us, I know people who got hurt. Almost every person, a family in my building has lost their grandson in this event. Everyone lost a person that he knew in this event. This is incomprehensible. So this is why this is something that is not only a geopolitical event. This is something that is touching the core of us as Jews, as Israelis, and this is why we're going to finish what Hamas started a week ago, and we are going to finish the threat on the citizens of Israel.
Well, in fact, Mr. Zilberman, since you make a mention of India at this point in time, there is absolutely no doubt about the fact that we too stand with you in these difficult times. Prime Minister Modi has also spoken to your Prime Minister, expressing not just solidarity, but also the fact that in the days to come, whatever assistance that Israel requires would also be provided. But having said that, at least one thing is very clear. We also have one thing in common. That is, we do not believe that there can be any negotiation or there cannot be any talk with any terror state, or be it non-state actors or anyone for that matter who has been espousing this entire act of terrorism. Hence, I want to ask you this question. Is it going to be different this time in terms of the way you deal with Hamas? Because you've been dealing with them for a very, very long time. Many would ask you, what is it going to be different this time?
Yes, this is a very good question. And unfortunately, it is going to be different because we don't have any other choice. Last week, exactly on Saturday, things have changed in Israel, and they will never be the same, literally. I mean, I don't want to sound too pomposic, but we have started a different era, really. I mean, for every and each Israeli that has been here, and for so many people around the world, the images, the cruelty of Hamas, of the new ISIS, is something that we cannot comprehend. And for us, this is the difference. For the first time, I think, and you've talked about different operations and even cycles of violence that Hamas is always, and I'll remind the viewers once again, Hamas has always committed war crimes almost on an hourly, on a weekly, on a monthly basis, when it is shooting rockets from a civilian population in Gaza to civilian population in Israel. They have always aimed to civilians, to hurt citizens and civilians. And last Saturday, they have took it up, not a notch, but 12 notches up. And we are talking about a new era that Hamas thought that he would he thought that it gained a huge success by murdering. I don't know if your viewers are aware of the party. I think that they see now the pictures, if I'm not mistaken, from Re'im. Re'im is a wonderful place near the Gaza Strip, inside Israel, of course. And there was a party for peace and harmony and music. And there were 4,000 people there. 260 of them were butchered. Some of them were raped. I'm sorry about my language. I'm sorry about the graphic description, but this is something we're talking about. 260 youngsters, people that came to dance, to enjoy life, and they were butchered, literally. I mean, so this is the difference. This is the point where we said, unfortunately, we don't like to reminisce, or we don't like to even compare things with the Holocaust, perhaps the darkest moment of the Jewish history, where 6 million of us were perished in Europe and in other places. But since the Holocaust, last Saturday was the day where the most Israeli citizens were murdered in one day. This is the number. So for us, you can understand why it is so dramatic. And this is why there's a huge difference between the other cycles and last Saturday.
Well, in fact, Mr. Zilberman, many who are basically arguing, and I was hearing this in the Western media also, that look here, there should be a rule of war. Of course, there should be a rule of war. But having said that, what you have been facing, the monstrosity of Hamas, that not only needs to be condemned, perhaps a strong action should be taken. But do you worry the stronger action that you take may have its own repercussions, which we are already witnessing? I'm given to understand that Saudi Arabia is essentially putting US-backed plans to normalize ties with Israel on ice. That's the latest report that is coming in. Is Israel essentially worried the kind of response or the nudge-nudge, wink-wink response that has come in from Saudi Arabia at this point in time?
I will ask you a question to your question. What do you think that Arabia Saudi, when it is looking at what is going on, who do you think they are rooting for? About the fundamental Islam that is aiming to destroy the region, or for a stable country like Israel that is pushing for stability and prosperity? We have shown in the last few years, through the Abraham Accords, through other peace agreements that we have signed with different countries, with Jordan and with Egypt, that Israel is not the problem. I'm not afraid about what is going to happen with the Saudis or with other countries. First of all, I'm concerned, we are all concerned about the safety of our civilians and citizens. This is our first priority. Afterwards, I am positive that other countries will look at what has happened and they will say, okay, I think that that Israel is a partner that I can rely on. This is someone that can push forward our region for new heights. Or perhaps looking at Hamas, that was governing the Gaza Strip for almost 20 years. And look what Gaza looks like today, even before last week. Instead of investing in Gaza, and there was so much money invested in Gaza in the last 20 years by countries from the Middle East and countries from Europe and the US and other countries around the world. And look what Hamas has done. It has only prepared itself for another attack against civilians and citizens. So where's the weight? Where do you want to be? On the side of Israel or on the side of the new ISIS?
Well, that was a strongly worded statement, Mr. Zilberman. One final question that I want to take with you, and for those who are watching you tonight, experts who have been saying that, look here, you need to distinguish between the Hamas and the Palestinians, and the fact that perhaps Israel should think about a revenge, that this should not be a revenge at this point in time because things have heated up. What would you tell those, especially those who've lost their own family members, who are really not looking at a balancing act? What is it that you would tell those experts, those countries who are now advocating that perhaps Israel should take this balancing act and perhaps rethink?
There is no balance with terror. There is no compromise with terror, and there is no ceasefire with terror. This is something that we have learned in the last few years and thoroughly last Saturday. And this is why I answer all these questions and thoughts about perhaps we should wait a second. There are, by the way, at this hour, there are hostages, kidnapped citizens inside Gaza, children, elderly men and women, handicapped people. We are talking about an organization that shot people elderly in their head. They burned people alive. There is no balancing. There is no compromise here. We should destroy Hamas once and for all. I think that the whole civilized world, from every country that sees itself as a country that is fighting terror, should stand beside Israel and fight against the terror organizations like Hamas, like Hezbollah, because today it is Israel. Hopefully, God forbid, tomorrow are different countries. So we are standing here. We are here in order for things not to repeat themselves, and we are here to regain safety and security to the state of Israel and to the whole civilized world again after this horrific events last week.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Zilberman, for taking out the time and speaking to Republic TV. Let me also tell you this, as a leading South Asian network, we've been doing our best to amplify the voices of those who have suffered at the hands of Hamas in the days to come. We're hoping that there would be more cooperation coming in from Israel's foreign ministry as we continue with our non-stop coverage about the ongoing situation in Israel. Thank you very much for joining us on the Weekend Debate on Republic TV.
Thank you very much.
See, right now we are showing the visuals from the ground zero, where now artillery tanks that are now entering to the forward areas. On the ground zero, this shows the Israel is all prepared for the big war that they are going to declare soon. Warning that they have given to the cadres and also the locals of the Gaza city to vacate the area within 24 hours. These are the never seen visuals on the roads of Israel ever before, because there has not been this massive deployment on the ground zero by the Israel forces.
Palestinians fled from northern Gaza Friday after Israel's military told some 1 million people to evacuate toward the southern part of the besieged territory ahead of an expected ground invasion against the ruling Hamas terrorist group. Hundreds of people gathered in the Turkish city of Istanbul on Friday to hold symbolic funeral prayers for Palestinians who have been killed in the recent violence in Israel and Gaza. Israeli shell landed in a gathering of international journalists covering clashes on the border in South Lebanon, killing a videographer, leaving 6 other journalists injured. A video surfacing from Israel showed a car on fire outside apartments in southern Israel. This video that has surfaced has captured the images of violence that took place on Wednesday. The video shows the aftermath of a rocket attack by Hamas. A group of people staged protests in support of Palestine at New York's Times Square amid the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. Clashes erupted in the West Bank city earlier today after protests were held in solidarity with people in Gaza. A video shot from inside their second flight carrying 235 Indian nationals before it took off from Tel Aviv captured the emotions of the Indians that were eagerly awaiting to escape the war-torn landscape and return back home. The IDF shared a video released by Hamas terror group. The video captures injuries, cries and fears of Israeli children held hostage by terrorists in their own homes. At the same time, the parents of the children lie dead in the next room. On the side of the United Nations headquarters are the faces of those abducted at the hands of Hamas, making it known the world this tragedy that Israelis and the foreign nationals alike are grappling with. Rockets were seen flying over the Gaza skyline as ambulances continue to arrive at the hospital. Medical services totally hit in Gaza while Israel continues to pound Gaza with strikes. As countries continue to evacuate their civilians from the war-torn region, we are seeing the Australian government saying it has assisted departure flight that will land in London this morning. And even the Canadian government is preparing to evacuate its citizens stuck in the war-torn country. Century Laminates gets you this report for more.
As the Israel-Hamas war enters day 8, several countries have been speeding up their evacuation processes to get its citizens to safety from war-torn Israel. As Israel has intensified its strikes on Gaza, vowing to destroy Hamas completely. The first Australian repatriation flight carrying 238 nationals from Israel has landed in London today.
I can confirm, and I'm very happy to confirm, that the first Australian government-assisted departure flight landed in London this morning. 238 Australians and their families on board. I'm very relieved to know that these Australians have landed in London and that they're on their way home, and I want to thank all the Australian officials.
Australian Foreign Minister has confirmed that 825 Australians have left Israel since fighting broke out between Israel and Hamas. Even Canadian officials are preparing to evacuate Canadian citizens from the Gaza Strip this weekend.
In terms of numbers, we're looking at about 150 individuals total in Gaza right now who have identified themselves as requiring assistance. The majority of these people are Canadians, but there are mixed families, and that will create additional sort of requirements in terms of ensuring everybody has documentation and is able to transit.
The Canadian government has also informed that 4 of its nationals are still missing in Israel. As Israel plans a full-blown attack on Hamas in Gaza, several countries are now rushing to get their civilians from the war-torn country to safety. Even India has flown back over 400 Indian nationals from Israel under Operation Ajay. Bureau Report, Republic TV.
Exactly, right now we are showing the visuals from the ground zero where now artillery tanks that are now entering to the forward areas. On the ground zero, this shows the Israel is all prepared for the big war that they are going to declare soon. Warning that they have given to the cadres and also the locals of the Gaza city to vacate the area within 24 hours. These are the never seen visuals on the roads of Israel ever before, because there has not been this massive deployment on the ground zero by the Israel forces.
Viewers, we're getting a top update on India's #1 news channel, Republic TV, and we are seeing multiple updates come in as we continue reporting from ground zero on the Israel-Hamas war. We'll get to all the details, but first the headlines we're tracking at this moment. Top headlines we're tracking right now. Israel goes all out to destroy Hamas force. Ground offensive next. Hamas aerial commander killed in Israel strikes. Over 1 million people head south in Gaza after Israel's warning. Israel takes Hezbollah terrorists head-on at the northern border. Humanitarian lobby seeks for pause in fight against terror. Can there be compromise in the battle? India delivers a crushing 7-wicket defeat to Pakistan at the Modi Stadium in Ahmedabad. Viewers, 8 days after Hamas launched an unprecedented attack on Israel, Israel is hitting back, and it is hitting back hard, from striking Hamas's bases to the elimination of its top commander. Israel is going all out in its fight against terror. Here is a report on all that has transpired throughout the day.
There is no let-up in fight against terror. Israel continues to pound Hamas infrastructure.
This is the fire where the Hamas is firing multiple rockets at this point of time, but it has been intercepted by Israel, is what we know. So yes, it's a fresh attack, a fresh rocket that has been fired from the Hamas side. As far as the information of the IDF is concerned, well, we have been reporting from the operational base of IDF, where we can see there are artilleries, there are tanks, small tanks, which has been present here. But yes, it's an IDF forces which has also eliminated a terrorist squad that tried to infiltrate into Israeli territory from Lebanon.
The war against terror is on two fronts now, with Israel striking Hezbollah terrorists trying to enter from Lebanon border.
हवा से जो है हमास के आतंकी ठिकानों को निशाना बनाया जा रहा है। कोशिश लगातार हिजबुल्लाह की तरफ से भी की जा रही है कि दक्षिण जो उत्तर का इलाका है वहां से बड़े आतंकियों को घुसपैठ करवाई जाए। एक ऐसा सेल जो कि फिलिस्तीन के आतंकियों को घुसपैठ करवाने की कोशिश कर रहा था उत्तर से, यानी कि लेबनान की साइड से, उसे जो है ध्वस्त किया गया है, उन आतंकियों को मार गिराया गया है आईडीएफ की तरफ से। लेकिन लगातार कोशिश अब हिजबुल्लाह की तरफ से की जा रही है कि टू फ्रंट वॉर में धकेला जाए इजराइल को। इजराइल का कहना है कि वो पूरी तरह से तैयार है, अगर हिजबुल्लाह की तरफ से भी कोई कोशिश की जाती है, किसी तरह की ऐसी हरकत की जाती है जो इजराइल के लोगों के लिए खतरनाक है, इजराइल की एकता और अखंडता के लिए खतरनाक है।
Israel military dropped pamphlets and asked civilians in Gaza to evacuate in order to avoid collateral damage. With massive destruction in Gaza, at least 1 million civilians are heading towards the south.
We do this, we advertised our intentions in advance, not because it has any military logic, it doesn't, because we want civilians not to be affected by the war. We didn't put those civilians there. They are not our enemy. We are not trying to kill or injure any civilians. We are fighting against Hamas. That needs to be abundantly clear.
But the international humanitarian lobby wants a pause in operations.
You know, we can't lose sight of the fact that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians had nothing to do with Hamas and Hamas's appalling attacks, and they're suffering as a result as well.
That asking 1 million people moving to the south in 24 hours is just impossible. You cannot move such a volume of people in a short period of time, especially if there is no shelters, neither transportation means. And from this point of view, we consider that this warning is good to know, but they have to give more time in order to make it possible and not to create a dire humanitarian situation.
Why should fight against terrorism be viewed with humanitarian lens? Bureau Report, Republic TV.
Viewers, in a mega exclusive, Republic spoke to the deputy spokesperson of the Israeli Foreign Ministry, Yossi Zilberman. Take a listen.
Mr. Zilberman, many who are basically arguing, and I was hearing this in the Western media also, that look here, there should be a rule of war. Of course, there should be a rule of war. But having said that, what you have been facing, the monstrosity of Hamas, that not only needs to be condemned, perhaps a strong action should be taken. But do you worry the stronger action that you take may have its own repercussions, which we are already witnessing? I'm given to understand that Saudi Arabia is essentially putting US-backed plans to normalize ties with Israel on ice. That's the latest report that is coming in. Is Israel essentially worried the kind of response or the nudge-nudge, wink-wink response that has come in from Saudi Arabia at this point in time?
I will ask you a question to your question. What do you think that Arabia Saudi, when it is looking at what is going on, who do you think they are rooting for? About the fundamental Islam that is aiming to destroy the region, or for a stable country like Israel that is pushing for stability and prosperity? We have shown in the last few years through the Abraham Accords, through other peace agreements that we have signed with different countries, with Jordan and with Egypt, that Israel is not the problem. I'm not afraid about what is going to happen with the Saudis or with other countries. First of all, I'm concerned, we are all concerned about the safety of our civilians and citizens. This is our first priority. Afterwards, I am positive that other countries will look at what has happened and they will say, okay, I think that that Israel is a partner that I can rely on. This is someone that can push forward our region for new heights. Or perhaps looking at Hamas, that was governing the Gaza Strip for almost 20 years. And look what Gaza looks like today, even before last week. Instead of investing in Gaza, and there was so much money invested in Gaza in the last 20 years by countries from the Middle East and countries from Europe and the US and other countries around the world. And look what Hamas has done. It has only prepared itself for another attack against civilians and citizens. So where's the weight? Where do you want to be? On the side of Israel or on the side of the new ISIS?
Well, that was a strongly worded statement, Mr. Zilberman. One final question that I want to take with you, and for those who are watching you tonight, experts who have been saying that, look here, you need to distinguish between the Hamas and the Palestinians, and the fact that perhaps Israel should think about a revenge, that this should not be a revenge at this point in time because things have heated up. What would you tell those, especially those who've lost their own family members, who are really not looking at a balancing act? What is it that you would tell those experts, those countries who are now advocating that perhaps Israel should take this balancing act and perhaps rethink?
There is no balance with terror. There is no compromise with terror, and there is no ceasefire with terror. This is something that we have learned in the last few years and thoroughly last Saturday. And this is why I answer all these questions and thoughts about perhaps we should wait a second. There are, by the way, at this hour, there are hostages, kidnapped citizens inside Gaza, children, elderly men and women, handicapped people. We are talking about an organization that shot people elderly in their head. They burned people alive. There is no balancing. There is no compromise here. We should destroy Hamas once and for all. I think that the whole civilized world, from every country that sees itself as a country that is fighting terror, should stand beside Israel and fight against the terror organizations like Hamas, like Hezbollah, because today it is Israel. Hopefully, God forbid, tomorrow are different countries. So we are standing here. We are here in order for things not to repeat themselves, and we are here to regain safety and security to the state of Israel and to the whole civilized world again after this horrific events last week.
So tracking right now as Israel-Hamas war enters 8th day today, sirens were heard across Israel's capital, Tel Aviv. An Israeli military aircraft has dropped pamphlets in the northern part of Gaza Strip for civilians, urging them for immediate evacuation. Israeli army has claimed it struck terrorists with 2 strikes at the same location who were trying to infiltrate Israel from Lebanon today morning. After Palestinians scrambled to flee northern Gaza, IDF has deployed their military tanks in the southern Israel area ahead of an expected land offensive. Large plumes of heavy smoke billowed from Israel's Sderot region amid the ongoing Israeli-Hamas war. Israel Defense Forces have eliminated Ali Kachi, commander of elite Hamas force. Ali Kachi led the Hamas terrorists who brutally massacred thousands of Israelis on 7th of October. And viewers, as the Israel-Hamas war continues to rage on, Israel is striking back hard. Israel's military conducted wide-scale strikes throughout the Gaza Strip. Furthermore, Israel has also claimed that a top Hamas commander has been eliminated in Gaza in one of the strikes. And this comes after and against the backdrop of the massacre of at least 1,300 Israelis following the unprecedented attack by Hamas terrorists. In an exclusive interview, we spoke to the former Prime Minister of Israel. Listen in to what they said.